All right, Griffin, so the big question this week, is it Florida-Georgia weekend or is it Georgia-Florida weekend?
Ooh, well, since the game is in Florida, I'm going to go with Florida-Georgia weekend. It is the nation's largest cocktail party, so, it looks like we're going to have a good time no matter which way you call the game.
It is a classic rivalry game, and it takes place in Jacksonville every year. I might be slightly biased, but I believe it's Florida-Georgia. I think all the Georgia fans believe it's Georgia-Florida. But I'd have to say Florida-Georgia Line named it Florida-Georgia Line for a reason.
Fair enough. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. At the beginning of the season, this game had the opportunity to be one of the top games for both teams this entire season. And, it really could have meant a lot as far as the SEC race goes. And it still does, oddly enough. If Florida wins this game, they control their own destiny in the SEC East. Surprisingly, even though, they haven't necessarily had the strongest season. I don't necessarily think that Florida's going to hold their own. Georgia looks like they're one of the top teams in the entire nation. The SEC's, the top of the SEC in Georgia and Alabama look like they're two of the best teams in the entire country. Georgia's defense, they're in the top 5 in 4 different defensive categories. They're third in total defense, only allowing 252 yards per game. They only allow 82 rushing yards per game and 12.6 points per game. They're also number 2 in the entire country on yards allowed on first down. They only allow 89 yards all season on first downs, which is another really impressive stat and something that Florida's going to have to keep an eye on if they want to stay ahead of the chains and have any hope of even competing in this game. Georgia also controls the game. They have an amazing rush offense led by Nick Chubb. They have amazing time of possession stats. Look for them to really control the pace of this game, keep it slow, keep Florida's offense on the field, wear down that Florida defense. That Florida defense can only make so many big plays and only keep up so much when that offense just isn't on the field. It's tough to really compete against another smash-mouth style football team. You saw what happened against LSU. When another team is able to run the ball like that and possess for so long, defenses get worn out into the fourth quarter. It's tough to keep up. And as I said earlier, they're averaging just over 283 yards on the ground per game. Nick Chubb is leading that attack. He's one of the best running backs and has been for a few years. He's had some injury issues, but looking to be fully healthy and looking to really raise that draft stock going into combine season. Look for him to have a huge game in this rivalry. It's a giant nationally televised game.
And compared to last year, I think he only had 20 rushing yards because of that injury. So he's going to be ready and hungry for even more this year. It's his senior season, last chance of glory at this Florida-Georgia rivalry. Now, Florida, they played Texas A&M tough. Defense was key in that game. The elite defense has been pretty quiet this season, and while there's still room for improvement, they turned on the gas and limited Texas A&M's rushing game to 83 yards, gathering 1 interception and forcing a turnover. But let's talk about the red zone offense. And this surprises me and probably does for other Florida fans as well. But the Florida offense is 100% in the red zone. I don't know how that happened, but every time we're in the red zone, they score. And it's only been 15 times. The only bad news to that is Georgia also is ranked first in red zone offense with 100%. And they have double the attempts at 29 compared to our 15. So that's a little concerning, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and against that Georgia defense, it'll be tough to even get on the other side of the 50-yard line, let alone the red zone. Florida definitely, as we've talked about, they have a lot of, so far this year, injury issues, which hasn't necessarily been an issue for them in the past. They're really looking to get Tyree Cleveland back. He should be suited up. We've both heard that he's been practicing well and expected to play. But in the first week back after an injury, it's really tough to get acclimated back to that offense. That's changed quite a bit since he was injured. They're also hoping to get a couple more players back, but we're still not sure. They're still questionable. Kadarius Tooney, Nick Washington, and Garrett Stevens. Hopefully they'll suit up. We're not entirely sure, though. And their defense gives up more yards than their offense gains, which is a problem, obviously, for any team. They've also had quarterback issues. The quarterback carousel keeps going around and around Florida ever since Tebow left. It doesn't really look like they have their all-star quarterback this season. Hopefully they're able to, manage with what they've got, especially against this team. And they also have back-to-back home losses. Janae, I don't know about you, but my coaches were never happy and always embarrassed, especially after a home loss.
Well, one home loss is one thing, but then back-to-back is a whole nother issue. For a team ranked 3rd nationally, they're obviously doing more right things than wrong. They claim top 5 spots in almost every defensive category in the NCAA. And offensively, Fromm could be a bit more accurate at 62% if we're going to be nitpicky here. But it's his first season, and overall this offense ranks 37th in the nation, so he's not doing anything wrong so far. The strength and schedule, I will say, is a little bad. They've only really played 2 opponents that have decent schedules, that being Mississippi State, who was ranked when they played at 17, and the other, Notre Dame, who wasn't ranked when they played, but is now in the top 25.
And that Notre Dame win is looking better and better every single week. That last week after Notre Dame blew out USC, that win's looking really impressive. My key player, I think Georgia, their defense is going to be key in this game, as it has been in every game. Even if their offense struggles, their defense has always been there to help them. I think Raquan Smith at 6'1", 225 pounds, he leads the team in tackling with he has 53 tackles this season, which is 5th in the SEC. He's one of the most just important guys on their team as far as run stoppers go. He runs sideline to sideline. His 4.5 40 coming out of high school was one of the fastest for all linebackers. He's faster than a lot of running backs, especially these Florida running backs. Being able to go sideline to sideline, trying to impress NFL scouts, this will be a huge game for him in doing that. And if Florida can't run the ball, they haven't shown that they're able to pass the ball very successfully this year. They could have their offense just entirely shut down, especially if Raquan Smith is able to really, use that high motor and use that speed to get into the Florida backfield.
Well, and he will have his eyes set on my key player, Malik Davis. Now, I hate to repeat key players, but with the injuries Florida's had, there's really no one left on this offense but Malik Davis. This is going to be a tough game for him, as he faces the 3rd best rushing defense in the nation. He's the only one who can guarantee the results. He has 506 rushing yards for 2 touchdowns this season, and he ranks 5th in the nation with 6.7 yards per carry. He's going to be key for Florida's offense this week.
I know Janae's going to kill me after this for saying that Georgia's going to win, but they're just the better team. They've been better all year. I don't know if they're necessarily better coached. It seems like they have been this year, but just statistically on paper and even watching film, it really looks like Georgia's just going to have a pretty easy time in this game. But being a rivalry, it's hard to say. Anything can happen.
Yes, you can throw out the record books, but the MAC magic seems to be coming to an end here in Gainesville. Since we are sitting in the swamp, I do have to go with the Florida Gators. This is my last time seeing it in Jacksonville, so I'm hoping for a win, but they surprised me with Texas A&M. I will say that. I thought we were going to lose by a good 21 points. And to only lose by 2, it was really heartbreaking because you're leading 95% of the game and then you lose it in the final 2 minutes. But they played their hearts out, and unfortunately it just wasn't enough. But I think coming off that bye week is always critical for both teams. That's why they have it the week before Florida, Georgia every year. But coming off that bye week, hopefully getting some of these players back like Tyree Cleveland, Kadarius Toney, this should be good news for the Gators.
Yeah, I also expect Florida to have quite a few tricks up their sleeve. It'll be really interesting to see if they're able to pull out any of those tricks and, keep the game interesting.
That's all we have this week, but don't forget to tune in next week and go ahead and subscribe to our channel or watch some of the other videos we have for matchups this week. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Griffin Parkrose. Have a great college football weekend, guys.